guys, Trent at Black Horse Ranch here, and you're looking at a prototype watering system for our chicken tractors. This is a watering system to, instead of doing the bell waterers, it goes inside the chicken tractors. We've built the Suscovich style chicken tractors, and this is our laying hens here. And so since we had a test bed, we've never tried this with other chickens, so we thought we'd give this a try with our laying hens. We also built a Suscovich style chicken tractor for our layers too. So this will be in their chicken tractor. But the idea is, we've got this one down here that the chickens actually drink out of. And so there's a float in there, and it keeps it at, you know, a level just below where they can stick their heads in, and then there's a bunch of slots cut in this 5-gallon bucket so they can fit their heads in. Now this one's kind of dirty. These chickens get their noses in dirt a lot and wash it off in the bucket, but that's just something that you'll have to keep up with, just like any watering system. So that float keeps it from spilling over, and then there's this tube that comes up here to this bucket that just has a bulkhead in it, very similar to the bell waterers. But these are food grade 5-gallon buckets, and these parts were reverse osmosis water fittings. So there's a bulkhead in that top one and a tube, and then on the back side of this one that hangs, there's a elbow and then another bulkhead that's connected to the float valve, and these are all push lock fittings. And this was all fairly inexpensive, a lot cheaper than getting the bell waterers. And we've had the bell waterers before, and they seem kind of problematic. So on these, you know, everything's out in the open. If something's not working, you can inspect it. So anyway, this has been working pretty good for our laying hens. And so I was just going to show you how to build one of these if you want to build one, and how they're going to go on the chicken tractors. Here's the back of the chicken tractors, and the way the watering system works is one of the 5-gallon buckets hangs right here in this slot, and then the tube routes through the chicken wire, and then the other one will hang from the peak and above the ground. That way, if the ground's a little unlevel or something, the water will still be level, and then you don't have to move the water every time you move the chicken tractor. It just goes with you, and then you can keep 5 gallons in there, and whenever the chickens drink it down, then it just dribbles down in a little bit more. So you can see we've got our 6 chicken tractors here, and so we're just starting to get these waterers constructed and ready for use. Okay, so this is how we're going to cut out the bucket. I've got a couple of jigs that I made, and I'll tell you the measurements of these before I use them. I've got a metal ruler. It's 1 inch wide, just makes it easy. And then a Sharpie, a screwdriver. I've got the kit with the float and the fittings and the bulkhead and all that stuff, and I'll have a link down in the description to that stuff. And then I've got my drill. This is a 5/8 inch bit, which you need for the bulkhead in the bucket. So the first thing that we want to do is drill the hole where the bulkhead's going to be, and that's the float valve connects to that bulkhead. So we need to get that mark there, and I'll show you this. So here's our float valve with the bulkhead on it. This float mounts inside the bucket, and then there's a little gasket that goes on there, and there's a little notch in the top. I'm not sure if you can see that very good, to keep the float from spinning when it gets a little pressure. So we'll put that in there, but that's a 5/8 inch hole that we have to drill. And so this is all figured out from where the float stops, the depth of the bucket and how deep we cut our holes for the chickens to put their heads through. So you can see this mark here. The first one I did, that's where I drilled the hole for the bulkhead, but I like it better lined up with the bucket handle. So that hole is 3 1/4 high, and then I'm just gonna eyeball it and line it up with the bucket handle here. So you can see we're just right on the line of this text. And then eyeball it, and I'll just drill the hole right there. Okay. And then the other thing that we'll come back and do, I mentioned to you that there's that little, I don't know what you'd call that, a little thing that we have to notch out for to keep this from spinning in the hole. And so I just use tin snips, and I put it, you want to put it right at the top of this hole. And I don't have my tin snips here, so we'll do that in a little bit. Okay, and so then the rest of this, so we'll flip the bucket all the way over, and now we're at the handle on the other side. And so what we want to do here is take our ruler and just line it up, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but we'll just eyeball it. And we'll take our Sharpie and we'll just put a mark there for now. Okay, so that's in the middle. And so now we've got these 2 jigs that I made. This first one to mark the top of the bucket is 1 inch and 15/16. So you can make it exactly 2 inches if you want. That's just what we did for our first one. And then I'm going to turn the bucket this way just so it's easier for me to do. But basically all we have to do is from the back side where our valve is, you hold your little jig along the bottom side of that bucket lip, and this is the top of our holes that we're gonna do. And now I mentioned before that these are food grade buckets, so they shouldn't leach out any chemicals into the water. I guess that's maybe debatable, but it's the best you can do with a 5-gallon bucket. Okay, I'm gonna flip it around again. And so this jig is for the bottom hole. And we'll start on this side again. So this jig has a little lip on it so that I can hook it on the bottom of the bucket. And that dimension is 3 1/16. So probably 3 inches is good enough. So we'll do the same thing. Now I have these Lowe's buckets, and the bottom line of the Lowe's emblem is right on the money, so I don't need to mark that. And I just found that holding the bucket up against you and pulling the mark towards yourself makes it easier to mark it. Okay, and we're just going to get close to the hole there. So here's our valve hole, and we're just close because our actual holes that we're going to cut are around the corner of it. So now we'll go back to our center line that we did, and we just want a 1-inch strip of plastic that we're going to leave here right above the bucket handle. So I'm just going to mark a 1/2 inch on either side. You really only have to do a 1/2 inch on one side. And then again, you're just going to eyeball it and get the ruler straight. And then you're going to mark both sides of the ruler. Okay, and so all of our spaces between where we're going to cut out are 1 inch wide. So I use this upside down, so sorry if that messes you up. But 2 1/2 inches is what we want to do. So 1, 2 1/2. And so that's the window we're going to cut out. It's a 2 1/2 inch window for the chickens to stick their head in. And then we need a space between. So again, just kind of eyeball it, line it up, draw a line on both sides. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, and then we'll do 2 1/2 inches again. And then on the last one, we'll just end with 2 1/2 inches. Okay, so you can see we'll have a window cut out, and then we'll leave a piece of plastic in, window cut, plastic, window cut, plastic. Okay, and so we're just going to lay out the other side the same way. So get your 2.5 inch mark. If you have patterns on the bucket like this one has, it helps you kind of eyeball the parallel. Okay, and then one last one on this end. Okay, so we'll have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 windows in this bucket. Okay, so then the next operation is to, so I've tried different ways of cutting this out. I've used tin snips and it does okay. It just gets your hand really tired and they're tight corners and that kind of stuff. I've been using a jigsaw. It goes a lot faster. And so what I'll do here is I'm just going to use this 5/8 inch drill and we'll just poke holes in all of these so we have a way to get the drill or the jigsaw started. And I'll just do it up in the corner. So our first bucket also has square corners on some of these, so I actually cut all the way to the corner, but not only does that take longer, it's kind of a catching point. If a couple of chickens get their heads in there at the same time, it can kind of get them caught down in that corner, so we've decided to just round them, which is why I drilled the holes up in the corner. But if you're not all the way up in the corner, it's fine. Okay, so then the next job, I'm not going to show it on here, but the next thing I'll do is use the jigsaw and cut all these out. But first let's get the valve put in there. So let me grab my tin snips. Okay, again, I just eyeball this. It doesn't have to be perfect. You want to get it fairly close to the middle. But I basically just take a little chunk out. Kind of like that. I might have to make it a little bit wider. Okay, and then the other thing that we have to do, if you're going to get this same float that I'm putting in the description, we have to change how this float is set up, because when it goes down, we want it to let water in, and when it goes up, we want it to stop the water. So this float valve is meant to be mounted like this, the way it's set up. But all we have to do is loosen this screw here, and then we basically go all the way the other direction, and then up one click. So there's little teeth in here that catch. And then when you tighten the screw, it's hooked into this part of the fitting, so it wants to move again. So you just have to hold that steady. So we're just one click off of straight down. So when this comes up, it closes the valve. When it comes down, it lets water in. Okay. So the pieces that come with this, so you can see there's this silicone gasket, and that goes on the inside of the bucket, and then on the outside of the bucket there's this ring that has the notch in it also, and then there's a nut that goes on that. So we'll put this in, get that little groove in the notch there so it doesn't spin. And we'll put this on here, get our nut on there. And now you don't want to get this super tight, because it'll actually squish the gasket so bad inside that it won't work. But you do want to get it tight enough so that it kind of flattens the bucket out, or else it'll leak. So I usually just grab this with a pair of channel lock pliers and just give it a nice little maybe quarter turn past finger tight. And then the other fitting that I put on there, the fittings that come with this kit are push lock, which is nice. So we have these little blue pieces, and then we have the elbow, and that just pushes right onto the end of this. And so we take these little blue pieces and we snap them right under that little piece there. And that keeps the hose from pulling out. So one at each end. And then we just take it onto this fitting here and we just push it on there. And so that's sealed. And so this will be the bucket that hangs closer to the ground, and so our hose will come up. We might loop it through our bucket handle and then up to the bucket that's hanging, that's got all the water in it, our reservoir. Okay, so that's as simple as that. We just have to cut this out, and that's it. Okay, so we got all our holes cut out, and you can see they don't have to be perfect, and they're not. But it leaves all these little shards on the edge, so we want to just hit those. This is a wood rasp, a fine wood rasp, and so if you just kind of run it along the edge, it takes those off really easy. Okay, so then we'll just go around the whole thing and take all those little filings off, and they're kind of staticky, so they stick to the bucket. But all you have to do is flush it with water and they come right off. So, and then just, you know, if you left any, like the edges aren't really bad after the jigsaw, like they're not going to cut the chickens or anything, but they have these, you don't want the chickens eating those plastic pieces, so let's try to get those off as best we can. Okay, so there's the finished product. Got it all rinsed off, and you can see the float in there. And so the only other thing we might do, depending on, we haven't hung one of these up yet, but we might just put a kink in the middle of the handle so that it's centered, so that it doesn't tip. But so far the one that we've used with the laying hens, it pretty much hangs level once you get some water in there. So, but that's it. And so when we get this hooked up, we'll show you one more view of it inside the chicken tractor. So here's how it's going to hang on the outside of the chicken tractor. So this is the bucket that will fill with water, and then the one that we just cut out the windows for, that'll hang from the roof in here down in there, and we'll have a tube connecting this bucket down to that bucket with the float valve in it. So we want to probably come off like at a 45-degree angle from where this is hanging here. So I'm just going to make a mark approximately where I think it should come off. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. It's a chicken tractor. So we've got our mark on the bucket there. And what I want to do is I want to drill a hole. Again, it's a 5/8 inch bulkhead. And I want to drill a hole here. There's a hex nut basically on the inside. So I want enough room off the bottom. See, the bottom has a lip. I want to drill the hole far enough off the bottom where there's room for that hex head to go in. But, you know, close enough to the bottom so that we can maximize the use of the bucket. We don't want to drill it way up here and have this much water that'll never drain out. So just, you don't want to get too close to the bottom, so even if you're up like an inch or something, that's fine. But it'll never drain down below the inch. So we'll just go drill this hole and put in the bulkhead. Okay, so here's the bulkhead. One side of it is fixed, so that side's fixed. This part doesn't come off. You can push lock into either side. This is the side we're going to push our hose into. Now, so these don't come with, again, I'll put a link in the description. These are separate from the float kit that we just showed you on the other one. They don't come with a gasket. And I did switch the gasket off of one of the other ones to see, because I had trouble sealing this hole. But the problem is we're so close to the bottom of the bucket here, and this is a plastic fitting, we can't tighten it enough to get it to flatten the bucket out. So even with the gasket, it was still leaking because the bucket's round and we've got a flat, we've got a flat connection in here. So my daughter actually gave me the idea. She said, how about plumber's putty? So plumber's putty is safe to use for water. It's non-toxic. Plumber's putty. And so what we're going to do then, this kind of makes our gasket for us, and this wouldn't work if we were, you know, under a pressurized system. But since this isn't pressurized, plumber's putty works great. So what we're going to do here is basically take a little bit of plumber's putty and just pack it around the outside of this bulkhead. Okay, like that. And then that inserts from the inside. And this bulkhead doesn't have the little notch because it doesn't matter if it spins in there. Okay, then we'll just push it in as good as we can. Throw the nut on there. Now this one I actually do same thing, you know, get as tight as you can with your hand, and then maybe come back. If you get this one too tight, you know, just remember these are plastic threads, so they'll skip and they're easy to strip out. So just be sure you don't. Same with the other one too, really. Just make sure you don't tighten it too much. So once we get that on there, what we're gonna have on the inside is we've got the plumber's putty squeezing out there, okay? And so we'll just reach in and we'll pull off the excess so it doesn't go down the tube and clog. And then you can save that for use on the next one. And so that's gonna create a watertight seal and we should be good to go. All right. So the next thing will be just to go ahead and set it up, and we'll show you what it'll look like once it's in the tractor. Now both of these we're gonna keep a lid on. We don't want debris falling in, you know, prevent it as much as possible. So this one will be inside with the chickens. And one of the reasons we did this is so the chickens can't actually climb up in there. But I like the idea of the float being exposed. You know, if you get a bellwether, the float is all internal, and I've read about people having a lot of problems with them. We've only used them a couple times and we've had problems with them. So this was kind of my idea to make it easier for the kind of the similar concept to the bellwether, but just everything's exposed, cheap parts, easy to replace things if they break. I think these buckets were like $3.25. Yeah, anyway, I'll put a link to all this stuff in the description so you can have that. So this one will be down low, this one will be up high, and they'll both have lids. The top one we won't want to snap the lid on because it'll create a vacuum and it won't let the water go down. But we could snap one side of it on so we don't get debris and stuff in our water and clog the hose. But I imagine that these will have to be cleaned out every so often. So we're gonna try leaving. I don't remember how long this tubing is that comes with it. We're gonna try it just leaving it as long as it comes without cutting it. That way we can, you know, mess with the bucket, clean it out or whatever. There's also a valve that comes with this. If you want, you can install the valve up here at the top. But really, you know, if you're messing with this bucket, so little water comes out through that valve, the float valve. You know, if you're scrubbing this out or whatever, you're not going to lose that much water if you just let it flow when you're messing around with it. But if you want to, you can put this valve in up here. I would put it up here near this bucket. You can shut it off and then wash it out however you want. But these are all push lock fittings, so they're not super easy to pull apart. They can pull apart if you take this little blue thing out, but they're meant to be pushed together and stay that way. So. Okay. So we're gonna get this tied up here. Now, Suscovich has knots, and I don't remember the knots that he used, but I'm just going to show you what I've done before, and we may go to the Suscovich knots, but for this test, we'll just do this. So you just tie a loop in there like that, You just make a loop and then tie a knot in it like that and pull it tight. And then we want the elbow pointing toward the back of the chicken tractor. Now this is the part where we may want to put a kink in this handle so that we're always lifting from the center. For now we'll just do it like this. But you'll have to also play with the height, depending on, when your chickens are small, you're not going to want it very high off the ground, but you're still going to want to be able to move your tractor, without having to go in and mess with your water all the time. So that we haven't done yet, so we'll have to see how it works. But like the size our chicks are right now, they probably could barely get their little heads in there. So basically what I'm doing is I put the end of the string through the loop, and then just by pulling on that string you can adjust the height or lower it, so you've got some play there if you want to mess around with it a bit. Alright, so let's get this tubing connected up. And again, this is push lock, so it's really easy. You just get it in the hole there and just give it a push. You'll feel it go in. And then there's sorry, I can't get a good. You'll feel it go in and it'll bottom out. It has to go through some teeth that keep it from pulling back out. And then there's a rubber, like O-ring kind of thing. You'll feel it push through, and then you'll hit as far as it'll go. So now one thing that we'll probably do on here at some point is put a hook or something on the back of here to hold this extra tubing off the ground. You don't want anything dragging, because when you're moving the tractors, anything that catches in the grass will be kind of a nuisance. So now the other thing that you want to keep in mind is if you keep this coil of tubing up above your water level, this is such a small flow, even if you get it siphoning, I think it'll stop working. So your coil of tubing needs to be below the bottom of this bucket here. Just from what we've seen on the one that we've tested, that seems to be the case. And then the other thing that you just want to consider is, you don't want to put this tube through the fence here so low that your chickens are going to be standing on it. Although if you leave all this slack, it probably doesn't matter that much anyway. So I'm going to put it through like right over the top of the wood here. And then we'll go on the inside and plug it into our bucket. So I'm just going to put it through the handle just to keep the tubing straight up and down. And then we'll just plug it into this elbow here. So, this can move. In this chicken tractor, we're going to have a 4-foot wide feeder. So, if your bucket twists a little because of the hose, you can just move it out. I have it going through the chicken wire there, but you can just move it out so that chickens can get all the way around it. It doesn't really matter which direction it points. The reason I stopped cutting the windows was just to keep the chickens kind of away from that float if we can. So let's go ahead and pour some water in here and see what happens. Alright, so I don't know if you can see from out there, might have to come in here, but it's already starting to come through the float valve there. And you can see it's starting to tip the bucket, which we've seen, but as soon as there gets to be a little bit more water in there, it'll level out a bit. So it's not a fast flow by any means, but it'll keep up with the amount of water the chickens will drink.
So there's our homemade watering system that we're going to try out this year, and seems to work good, and hopefully we'll like it, and hopefully it'll help you guys out. So take care. Thanks for watching.